Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. Echo of Life. Let's start. Imagine a small child sitting alone in their room, looking at the ceiling. Toys are scattered around, but they're not playing. Instead, they're wondering why the air in the house feels so thick, why their laugh always seems too big, why the quiet between sounds feels so loud. They can't name what they're feeling, but they feel it, the weight of something unspoken. Maybe it's a parent's distance. Maybe it's shouting from another room. Maybe it's simply the absence of warmth. That child learns early that the world can feel unsafe. And so, they begin to carry an invisible bag filled with confusion, shame, and longing. Years later, that same child is grown. And when life feels heavy, they reach for something, anything, to soften the noise inside. What if the addiction isn't the real issue? What if it's the answer to a pain that was never allowed to heal? Most people see addiction as a weakness, a moral failing, a bad habit gone too far. But after studying psychology, listening to thousands of stories, and looking at the research, something else becomes clear. Addiction often isn't about the substance or the behavior. It's about the emotional wound underneath. It's about childhood pain. And once you see that connection, you can't unsee it. The patterns become unmistakable. First, let's be clear. Trauma isn't always dramatic. It's not only about loss or violence. Sometimes it's about what didn't happen. The hug never given, the reassurance never spoken, the presence missing when it was needed most. Children don't just need food and shelter to grow. They need attunement, safety, and love without conditions. When that's missing, the nervous system wires itself in a state of alert. That state doesn't fade with age. It stays. And one day it finds an outlet, often through addiction. Think of it this way. The human brain has one primary goal: to protect us from pain. When the pain feels too much, it looks for shortcuts. Substances, distractions, behaviors. They become paths to comfort. That's why addiction is so powerful. It's not because people want to harm themselves. It's because deep down they want relief from memories, from feelings, from loneliness. Addiction isn't about chasing pleasure. It's about escaping pain. Research in neuroscience shows that when a child experiences early stress or neglect, their brain develops differently. The stress hormone cortisol floods their system too often. Over time, this rewires the reward circuits, especially those involving dopamine, the chemical that motivates us and says, "This feels good, do it again." But in children who grow up with trauma, the dopamine system becomes fragile. Everyday joys, like connection, play, small achievements, don't light it up the way they should. Later, when that person discovers alcohol, scrolling, gambling, or other behaviors, the brain lights up as if it's been waiting for this. It says, "Finally, relief. Finally, I can feel something other than emptiness." That's the hidden bridge between childhood pain and adult addiction. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to carry a quiet sadness? Even when they smile, they laugh in groups, they succeed at work. But if you look closely, you might see it, a certain look in their eyes. That's often unprocessed childhood hurt. Here's the key. The brain doesn't separate emotional wounds from physical ones. To the nervous system, both are threats. That's why someone can crave a substance as urgently as a drowning person craves air. It's not weakness, it's survival. When I began to understand this research, it made sense of something I'd seen again and again. Why people who seem strong and capable could spiral into addiction. It wasn't a lack of willpower. It was because they carried hidden memories, hidden feelings, hidden beliefs like, "I'm not enough, I'm unlovable, I'm broken." And addiction became their way of quieting those voices. For a while, it works. That's the dangerous part. It feels like healing. But the relief is temporary. The pain returns. And so the cycle continues. Now, let's pause on an important question. If childhood trauma shapes the brain in ways that make it vulnerable to addiction later, does that mean people are trapped by their past? The answer is more complex and more hopeful than you might think. But first, let's look at how trauma is stored in the body and why it resurfaces so powerfully. Memories aren't just stories in our minds. They're sensations, patterns, and triggers held in the nervous system. That's why your stomach might drop when someone raises their voice, or why a certain smell or tone can suddenly bring you back to childhood without warning. It's not conscious, it's biological. Unresolved trauma often creates what psychologists call emotional flashbacks. Moments when an adult suddenly feels the helplessness of a child again, without knowing why. In that state, the urge to escape is overwhelming. That's when addiction feels irresistible. It's not about wanting to feel high, it's about wanting to feel safe. And addiction isn't only about substances like alcohol or drugs. It can be about work, achievement, social media, even relationships. Anything that offers temporary relief can become addictive if the wound beneath is deep enough. That's why trauma-informed care has become so vital. It shifts the question from, "What's wrong with you?" to, "What happened to you?" That change moves us from judgment to compassion, from shame to understanding. Consider this. Studies show that people who experienced multiple forms of childhood adversity, neglect, conflict, instability, have a much higher risk of addiction later in life. Not just a little higher, exponentially higher. Each layer of pain adds to the brain's need for relief. Addiction becomes the mind's imperfect attempt to soothe itself. Let's return to that child from the beginning, the one staring at the ceiling, wondering why life feels heavy. That child isn't broken. They're trying to survive in an environment that isn't nurturing them. Survival strategies look different. Some children become perfectionists, always seeking approval. Others act out to be seen. Some retreat inward, building private worlds to escape outer chaos. Later, these survival strategies can evolve into addictions. But they began as adaptations, brilliant, necessary adaptations to unbearable circumstances. Seeing addiction as an adaptation, not a flaw, helps us view people not as broken, but as survivors. And this leads to a deeper realization. If childhood trauma wires the brain toward addiction, then healing trauma can rewire it toward freedom. The same neuroplasticity that created vulnerability can also build resilience. So, are we forever trapped by what happened in childhood? No, the brain is not fixed. It's adaptable like clay. It changes and reshapes. This ability to rewire neuroplasticity is one of the most hopeful discoveries in modern psychology and neuroscience. What was shaped by pain can be reshaped by healing. But the process requires something many underestimate: safety. Addiction thrives in isolation, in shame, in the silence of, "I can't tell anyone." Healing, on the other hand, requires connection. A nervous system wounded in relationship can often only heal in relationship. That might mean therapy where someone listens without judgment. It might mean a trusted friend who meets vulnerability with compassion. It might mean learning to offer yourself the kindness. Over time, this sense of safety allows the brain to calm. Cortisol levels drop. The stress response weakens. And slowly, the cravings for escape begin to loosen their grip. Studies show that practices like mindfulness, meditation, and deep breathing don't just calm you in the moment. They actually rewire brain circuits disrupted by trauma. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making, grows stronger. The amygdala, which triggers fear, becomes less reactive. Dopamine pathways can start responding again to simple joys, sunlight, laughter, creating something meaningful. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about giving the nervous system new experiences of safety, joy, and connection. Ones that rewrite the old story. But healing rarely happens in one big moment. It happens slowly, in small choices repeated over time. Choosing to sit with discomfort for a few seconds instead of numbing it. Choosing to reach out instead of withdrawing. Choosing to speak gently to yourself instead of harshly. These moments might feel small, but to the nervous system, they are monumental. Each one is like a stitch, slowly mending the torn fabric of the self. Have you ever noticed how some people, after years of struggling with addiction, seem to carry a special kind of wisdom once they heal? As if the very thing that once broke them has become their greatest teacher. That's no coincidence. Walking through the fire of trauma and learning to live without numbing builds extraordinary empathy. They can sense unspoken pain in others, offer comfort without judgment, and often become guides for those still struggling. It's almost poetic. The wound becomes the gift. The weakness becomes strength. That transformation is not just psychological, it's deeply human. Let's be honest, the path isn't easy. Addiction can feel like an anchor pulling you back just as you think you've surfaced. This is where self-compassion becomes essential. Many people stuck in cycles of addiction think, I failed again. I must be broken. But the truth is, every slip, every struggle is part of the rewiring process. Think of it like learning to walk after an injury. You stumble, you fall, but each attempt strengthens muscles that will one day carry you with ease. Healing from trauma is no different. It's not about perfection. It's about persistence. Here's another layer. If trauma can shape the brain and healing can reshape it, what role does meaning play? Psychologists have found that people who overcome addiction rarely do it through willpower alone. They do it when they find something bigger than the addiction. A purpose, a passion, a reason to move forward. Meaning is the antidote to emptiness. When someone finds meaning through art, service, faith, or simply the commitment to live fully, they no longer need a substance to fill the void. The void begins to fill itself. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust, wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." That truth applies here powerfully. Childhood trauma often steals our sense of worth, belonging, and purpose. Addiction becomes a placeholder. But when we rediscover meaning, when we reconnect with the part of ourselves that was buried but never destroyed, addiction begins to lose its power. What the brain was searching for all along wasn't a substance. It was connection, purpose, and love. Picture that child again, now grown, sitting in a quiet room, breathing deeply, maybe with tears in their eyes, finally telling their story to someone who doesn't look away. In that moment, something shifts. The child within feels seen. The adult feels lighter. The cycle begins to break. This isn't a fantasy. This is what healing looks like for countless people who dare to face their pain with courage. And here's a final insight. Healing from trauma and addiction isn't just personal. It's generational. Research on intergenerational trauma shows that the wounds of one generation often pass to the next, not only through behavior but even biologically. Children of parents with unresolved trauma can inherit stress patterns in their own nervous systems. But the opposite is also true. Healing can be passed down, too. When one person decides to break the cycle, to face pain instead of numbing it, they don't just change their own life. They change the path for everyone who comes after them. That is the power of this journey. It's not only individual, it's collective. So where does that leave us? Childhood trauma can lead to addiction. That is true. But the story doesn't end there. It can be rewritten. The same brain that once sought escape can learn to seek presence. The same heart that once felt broken can discover resilience. The same life that once seemed destined to struggle can become a light for others still finding their way. If you've stayed this long, perhaps something in this story feels familiar. Maybe you see yourself in it, or someone you love. If so, I want you to remember, addiction is not the opposite of willpower. Addiction is the language of pain, and healing is the language of love. Every step toward compassion, every moment of connection, every act of courage, these are not small. They are revolutionary. They remind us that no matter how deep the wound, no matter how far the fall, the human spirit was never meant to stay broken. It was meant to rise. So here's one last question to carry with you. What if the scars you carry are not signs of weakness, but maps? Maps that can lead you not only out of the darkness, but into a life richer, deeper, and more meaningful than you ever imagined. That's the paradox of healing. It doesn't erase the past, it transforms it. And in that transformation lies freedom. Thank you for watching my video. Please subscribe my channel for more update.